The film opens in 1974 with a war veteran named Max Eriksson sitting on a subway train. When a young Vietnamese woman boards the train, Eriksson watches her with a haunted gaze. Suddenly, she reminds him of his time in the Vietnam War. The scene then shifts to a flashback during the Vietnam War in 1966. A team of American scouts is given the task of searching for secret tunnels used by the Viet Cong to launch surprise attacks. One night, while in a dense forest, they hear mortar fire. They observe the map and realize that nearby soldiers are under enemy attack. Lieutenant Riley instructs his squad to listen for fire to figure out where the enemy is, and then inform headquarters of their current position. Suddenly, out of fear, one of the soldiers starts shooting at a Vietnamese soldier. This blows their cover, and the enemy is alerted to their position. Soon mortar rounds begin to rain down, and some soldiers are killed while others rush to safety. Meanwhile, young PFC Max Eriksson, who was patrolling alone, seeks cover when he hears an explosion nearby. Suddenly, the ground shakes, causing him to fall into a secret Viet Cong tunnel where his legs get stuck. As air support arrives and begins attacking the enemy, Eriksson becomes trapped in the tunnel. Unbeknownst to him, a Viet Cong soldier with a knife silently approaches through the narrow tunnel. But before he can attack, Sergeant Tony Meserve manages to rescue Eriksson. The Americans then regroup and shoot down the enemies one by one. The next morning, Eriksson, Meserve, and their team, consisting of Corporal Thomas Clark, Private Hatcher, and Sergeant Brownie, go to a nearby river village for temporary shelter. Eriksson is different from the rest of his team because he is kind to the local children, unlike his colleagues who are suspicious of everyone in Vietnam. Despite the tense atmosphere of the war, Eriksson maintains his humanity by treating the locals with respect and offering help when needed. Later, Sergeants Brownie and Meserve remind their soldiers of the importance of obeying orders without question, especially since their time in Vietnam is coming to an end. However, at that moment, Viet Cong soldiers are hiding in the bushes, along with local informants. Suddenly, they open fire on the Americans and mortally wound Sergeant Brownie. This catches the American soldiers completely by surprise, but they manage to repel the attack and kill the enemies. Following this incident, Meserve's team receives a 48-hour permit, and they plan an evening in the nearby town. However, their permit is abruptly terminated, and they are ordered to report for a patrol at 6 a.m. the next morning. That evening, they carry out a reconnaissance mission in the area. Meserve, grieving over the loss of his close friend Brownie, expresses a desire to seek solace in the company of a local girl in the nearest village. Later that night, the team arrives at their advanced post to venture into the village. However, a guard and the commander of their company deny them entry to a brothel. The commander informs them that the area remains out of bounds for them. As a result, the team is forced to remain confined to their location until further arrangements are made. Realizing they are stuck, the soldiers return to the barracks and wait for their morning march. Meserve then introduces PFC Antonio Diaz to the group as a replacement for the late Brownie. Meserve briefs the team on their upcoming mission and reveals that they will leave the next day 2 hours earlier than planned. He wants to visit the nearby village and kidnap a local girl for their personal amusement. Eriksson is shocked by his superior's outrageous and criminal statements. He shares his concerns with his friend, but the latter reassures him that Meserve must be joking. Unfortunately, the next morning, the team reaches the village and forcibly takes a young girl named Than Tai Oan from her family. Meserve informs Eriksson that they will have fun with the girl once they arrive at their outpost. Soon after, chaos erupts in the village as the relatives beg the soldiers to spare the girl. However, the soldiers turn a deaf ear to all their pleas. Instead, they commit a terrible act against the girl's sister, leaving Eriksson shocked and unable to believe that his comrades could do such a thing. After kidnapping the village girl for their own sick amusement, the soldiers continue with their duties. Eriksson confronts Sergeant Meserve, insisting that what they have done is a crime, but the latter ignores his objections and sends him out on patrol. Meanwhile, Private Hatcher and Corporal Clark see no problem with Meserve's actions, treating them as entertainment. Later, the group pauses and tries to interact with the captive girl. Clark approaches her first, but is interrupted by Hatcher, who thinks he sees someone in the bushes. He fires a shot, only to discover that it was just an animal. The team realizes that the gunshot might reveal their location to the enemy, so they decide to proceed, postponing further interaction with the girl. A few hours later, they find an abandoned log cabin deep in the woods. While Meserve, Clark, and Hatcher search the area, Diaz and Eriksson clean out the hut. Diaz turns out to be a decent person who does not want to mistreat the girl. Because they share the same perspective, Diaz and Eriksson agree to support each other. They want to make sure that no one is forced to commit a crime. Eriksson then approaches the captive girl, Owan, showing compassion and care for her. He successfully gains her trust and takes care of her wounds. Later, when the rest of the team returns to the hut, Sergeant Meserve suggests forcibly interrogating the girl. He ties her hands and outlines the order in which the soldiers will take advantage of her. Eriksson is certainly horrified by the plan. He and Diaz oppose the idea, saying they will not participate in the assault. However, the sergeant threatens to exclude them if they do not obey. This frightens Diaz, and he reluctantly agrees to participate in the horrific act. Furious, Eriksson tries to help the girl, but Clark puts a knife to his throat and orders him to mount guard for the night. A helpless Eriksson then watches his fellow soldiers take turns in attacking the girl in the hut. The next morning, the squad arrives on a slope and positions itself on a railroad bridge overlooking a Viet Cong river depot. They leave Owan with Clark in the hut. Nearby, they spot a group of armed Vietnamese carrying artillery shells. They report the coordinates to headquarters and keep an eye on the enemy as they prepare for their mission. Soon after, Eriksson and Hatcher return to the outpost to resupply and pick up smoke grenades. When they arrive at the hut, Clark becomes hesitant to stay with the girl, so he orders Eriksson to take his place. Once they are alone, Eriksson fully understands the extent of the abuse on Owan. She is weak, wounded, bruised, dehydrated, and sick. He feels terrible about her condition, so he unties her ropes and offers her something to eat and drink. Back on the railroad bridge, Sergeant Meserve is infuriated when his men return without Eriksson, so he orders Clark to return to the outpost to get him. The sergeant is worried that Eriksson will do something drastic. Meanwhile, Eriksson decides to help Owan return to his village. However, she is too scared to go alone, so she begs Eriksson to accompany her. Eriksson realizes that leaving the outpost with Owan would make him a deserter. He could be punished for it. However, seeing the poor girl's desperate plea, he decides to go ahead. Just as they are about to flee, Clark arrives and stops them. He forces them to rejoin the team on the railroad bridge. Unfortunately, Eriksson and Owan are dragged to the bridge and ordered to stay put. As the team waits to launch their attack, Owan suddenly starts coughing due to his weak health condition. Meserve realizes that she might endanger their position, so he orders Eriksson to kill her. Our hero refuses, so the sergeant orders Hatcher to do so, but he too hesitates. As the helicopters approach in the distance, Meserve urgently orders Diaz to kill her. Under pressure from his superior, Diaz decides to do the unthinkable. Just then, Eriksson fires his rifle into the air to attract the Viet Cong's attention and successfully prevents the killing. During the firefight between the American and Vietnamese soldiers, Clark stabs Owan several times. Unfortunately, Eriksson does not notice them because he is too focused on fending off the enemies. The situation becomes critical when the Viet Cong bring mortars along the river and begin firing on the bridge. But Meserve and his team react well by using a machine gun to eliminate the enemies one by one. Meanwhile, a badly wounded Owan gets up and tries to escape across the bridge below. When Meserve notices her, he orders the team to shoot her. Eriksson tries to stop them, but Meserve hits him with his gun and knocks him down. After this, the team shoots the poor girl several times, killing her on the spot. Her lifeless body then falls from the bridge and lands on the ground below. Following the incident, Meserve leads his men away from the scene, while Eriksson lies on the platform alone. He barely sees American helicopters conducting an air attack on the enemy riverboat, and also notices Owan's mutilated body below. The resulting explosion sets fire to a nearby US Navy boat, killing its entire crew. Shortly thereafter, Eriksson is evacuated from the helicopter. He wakes up in a hospital and confides in his friend Rowan about Owan's kidnapping, assault, and murder. Rowan understands his concern and advises him to talk to Lieutenant Riley. Eriksson does so, But unfortunately, Riley responds with a lengthy explanation. He emphasizes how the incident could jeopardize the unit's operational record, and hints that it would be best to forget about it. Determined to seek justice, our hero risks his military career by disobeying Riley's orders and reporting the incident to Captain Hill. However, Hill also responds harshly and reprimands Eriksson. She warns him that pursuing the matter could result in harsh sentences for the soldiers and could lead to reprisals against Eriksson and his family when the convicted men are released. Meanwhile, Meserve learns that Eriksson has reported Owan to senior officers. This fills him with anger, and he decides to kill him with a grenade. That night, Eriksson becomes suspicious when he sees Hatcher in front of the toilet door and quickly runs away. Fortunately, he notices the grenade and quickly jumps out of the toilet just before it explodes. Eriksson then confronts Meserve and the rest of the culprits. He tells them that everyone already knows what they did. However, the authorities do not want to listen to him. He suggests that they leave him alone because they will never be convicted of their heinous crime. Eriksson then drowns his sorrows in a bar. A minister approaches him and asks him about his mood. Although Eriksson is aware that justice will not be served, he confides in the minister about the tragedy of the village girl. Soon, an investigation is launched and Owan's body is discovered on the river. This increases tension within the unit, and Captain Hill informs Eriksson that his actions will have consequences because he could not let the situation go. In the next scene, all soldiers are interviewed individually and accept their guilt. As a result, they are tried in court. Meserve is sentenced to 10 years of hard labor, Diaz to 8 years, Hatcher to 15 years, and Clark to life in prison. As they leave the courthouse, Meserve approaches Eriksson and whispers something unintelligible to him with an evil look in his eyes. The scene then shifts to the present. Eriksson wakes up from his tormented flashback on the train. When he reaches the next stop, the Vietnamese woman, who reminds him of Owan, gets off. He notices that she has left her scarf behind. Eriksson quickly picks it up and exits the train to return it to her. When he approaches the woman, she notices a troubled expression on his face. When he asks her why, Eriksson tells her that he has just woken up from a nightmare. The woman then thanks him for the scarf and offers him comfort, assuring him that his nightmare is now behind him. As the film draws to a close, a faint smile appears on Eriksson's face. Video is over. Subscribe to our channel, activate the notification bell, and become part of a community. Subscribe now, leave a like, leave a comment, and indicate which film you would like the recap of.